What's up, RK team? It's Avi, and we're back with another macroeconomics lesson. Today, we're going to be talking about financial markets and monetary policy. So, first, we're going to discuss the two key financial assets. The first one is money. We all know money. But the two things you need to know for this definition is that it doesn't pay interest and it's liquid, which means you can use it for your daily transactions, such as cash and your checking account deposits. The other is bonds. Now, bonds pay interest but aren't liquid, which means you can't use them for transactions right away. You need to first convert them to liquid. This, for an example, is buying a government bond, which means you lend money and get it back with interest after a certain period. So, with bonds, essentially, you make money because there's an interest rate on them, so you make more money after a certain amount of time. Now, let's talk about the demand for money. The demand for money essentially means how much money am I holding and how many bonds am I holding. This is determined by two main factors, your income and interest rates. Let's say you have more income. This means you need more money for transactions. However, if there are higher interest rates in the economy, people hold less money because they can earn more by investing in bonds. Now, this is the money demand formula. MD stands for money demand. And then we have Y for income. The dollar sign means that we're talking about nominal income. Then L, we have the liquidity preference function, which is the function that essentially talks about the preference in liquidity, which means do we prefer having more money or do we prefer having more bonds? And then the I is the nominal interest rate. Now let's talk about money equilibrium. We've talked about money demand, but we also need to talk about money supply. So money supply is controlled by the central bank and is represented as a fixed amount. So money equilibrium is where money supply equals money demand. Now, if central bank increases the money supply, this means that there is more money in the economy, which means it's easier to buy bonds. Because of this, the interest rates fall, and vice versa. If the money supply decreases, it's harder to get bonds, which means that the interest rates rise. Now, here is money equilibrium in the form of graph. So in the first graph, you can see money demand and money supply plotted on a graph, and the point at which they intersect is the money equilibrium. So we have the equilibrium interest rate and the equilibrium quantity. And in the second graph, we can see what happens when there is an increase in money supply. When you can see the curve shift from M to M dash, you can see that the interest rate has also fallen down as the equilibrium is now at a lower point. So again, this is a similar relationship with bond prices and interest rates. When bond prices go up, interest rates fall, and when bond prices fall, interest rates rise. Now let me explain this. Let's say the interest rates have risen in an economy. This means that all the previous bonds that used to exist are not as worth it anymore because the new bonds have higher interest rates. So I will earn more money. So the old bonds the prices go down. Similarly, when the interest rates fall, the old bonds are now better because the new bonds have a lower interest rate. So the old bonds prices go. So again, let's look at this to an example. If you buy a bond for $1,000 and it promises to pay $100 next year, the interest rate is 10%. But if the price of the bond rises to 1,100, but it still promises to pay $100 next year, the interest rate is not 10% anymore. Mathematically, it's below 10%. So you can see it's a decrease in the interest rate. Now, let's talk about monetary policy, which is a policy that the government uses to control the interest rates and the money supply in the economy. We have expansionary monetary policy, which is where the central bank buys bonds, which increases the money supply in the economy. This lowers the interest rate and stimulates the economy. So, if the central bank is buying bonds, it injects more cash into the economy, which makes loans cheaper as the interest rates are now lower. And monetary policy is where the central bank sells bonds, which reduces the money supply. This ends up raising the interest rate and slows down the economy. So the government uses these two policies in the way to control the economy. Now, let's talk about liquidity trap. So, of course, we can adjust the economy using monetary policy, but sometimes, like for example, when the interest rates are close to zero, increasing the money supply no longer lowers interest rates. For example, imagine interest rates are at 0% and the central bank buys bonds. Usually, when they do that, people want to buy more people want to invest more. But if the interest rate is zero, holding money and holding bonds is the same thing because now you don't earn money on the bonds. If the interest rate is 0%, if you invest in bonds, you don't get any extra money after a given period of time. So at that point, having bonds and having money are essentially the same thing. Now we're going to talk about banks and money creation. So this just means when banks lend money, it creates new deposits in the economy, which increase money supply. So if there's an investment of a certain amount, that bank can use a part of that money for another investment and then for another investment. So it's not, essentially, it just creates a new flow of money. So that is all the theory for lesson 3. If you guys have any questions, my DMs are always open, and I hope you guys enjoy.